Hi, what is the best age for children to receive their inheritance? Too early, you're going to ruin them. Too late, they won't really need it. With a living trust, when we die, we can have the trust hold off on the distribution of their inheritance until you feel they're ready. But what is that age? The courts think that an 18-year-old is ready. Yes, that's a teenager. Let me show you my 18-year-old teenagers. No, I don't have 6 kids. Only 2 of them are mine. The rest are their cousins. They were all between 18 and 21. This was a Chinese New Year, and it's a tradition to get these little red packets with money in it. Sometimes it's $20, sometimes it's $50. If an aunt slips a Benjamin Franklin, a $100 bill, whoa, they will be over the moon. That's the kind of money that an 18 to 21-year-old get really excited about. Not a whole inheritance in one outright gift. What if they're older, say 35, some of us, our kids are over 40, are they ready? Well, if you look at the risk to a child's inheritance if he owns it outright, you'll realize that a lot of these risks are actually outside their control. A lot of these risks don't care how old your child is. I talk a lot about the risk of an inheritance that is owned outright by a child without any protection. So I'm not going to go into a long discourse about it. I'll just quickly list them. Lawsuits, divorce, ex-spouses walking away with half the inheritance, bankruptcy from failed businesses. Here's another one. It's a recent story that's still raw for me. The story goes that this young man inherited quite a bit of money from his parents. Unfortunately, he got it co-mingled as a marital property. You know how? Just from one incident. He made a donation, of all things, a donation to a charitable organization in both his name and his spouse's name. So the spouse's attorneys argue that that one act alone made the inheritance a marital property. And when he passed away, no estate plan, the inheritance gets passed on to his next of kin, which was his wife. And a few years later, his wife remarried. So essentially, this young man's father, all that assets he spent his life building to pass on to his son, that inheritance has now left the bloodline. How sad is that, right? A lot of these risks are sometimes financial bad luck that is outside the control of the owner. So I don't think age 30, 40, even 50, I don't think age alone can protect your inheritance from these bad elements. Now, what if your child does not own the inheritance? You can't lose something you don't own. If he doesn't own the inheritance, then lawsuits, creditors, ex-spouses, dying without a will cannot get to it. Think of it this way, okay? If I'm a reckless driver and I hit another car, they can sue me and come after my house, right? Can they come after your house? Of course not. I don't own your house. I can't lose something that I don't own. That's the idea. All right, buckle up, put on your seatbelt, because we're entering Estate Planning 102 now. But this is the secret that strategic, wealthy families have known for generations. And here it is. Sometimes control is much better than ownership. Control gives you freedom, options. Ownership brings a lot of risk. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, that's crazy. I haven't worked my whole life to not have my child not own and enjoy his inheritance, correct? No. Here is what makes this control over ownership structure so powerful. There is a way to set it up so that your child has a lot of control without the risk of ownership. It's called a descendant trust. It is something that you specify in your revocable living trust. You don't need an attorney. Yeah, many years ago, this kind of powerful structure used to be only the domain of very wealthy families because attorneys would charge a lot of money to set something like this up. But not today. In fact, the top tier online DIY estate planning platforms will allow you to set up a descendant trust inside your revocable living trust without an attorney. So this is how this descendant trust works, okay? You have 4 levers of control and no ownership, which means no risk. Let me go through the control that your child will have. Number 1 is the access to the funds. So even though he does not own the trust assets outright, the IRS allows the primary beneficiary, which is your child, to access funds for anything related to health, education, maintenance, and support. It's called the HEM standard. It's pretty universal now, so you're not going to be dragged into court to argue for it. That's the first control, access to the funds for HEMs. The second control is, as trustee of his own trust, your child can more broadly interpret what HEMS is. You can get someone else to be the trustee of your child's trust, but if your child is responsible and shows, good management of money, why not make him trustee of his own descendant trust? As trustee, he's able to interpret the HEM standard more broadly without having to get approval, going to a third-party trustee. And yet the IRS still considers him not the owner of the trust. Let's go into the third lever of control, which is if your child has a need that is outside HEMS. I think health, education, maintenance, support covers a lot of things, especially if you're your trust's own trustee. But perhaps he wants to splurge on a vacation that is outside a typical HEM standard. All he needs to do is to get an independent trustee to approve the requests. Where do you find an independent trustee? There are definitely rules about it. It can't be your sister, your child. It can't be someone who's related to you or somebody who stands to gain from being the independent trustee. That still leaves a lot of people. He can ask his best friend to be the independent trustee. He can ask a trusted neighbor, a life coach, a pastor to be his independent trustee to approve his requests if they're outside the HEM standard. The fourth lever of control is called the power of appointment. Even though he does not own his trust assets outright, the power of appointment gives him authority to direct where these assets can be transferred to, either when he's alive or when he passes away. So for example, if during his life one of his siblings has a medical condition and needs financial aid, as a trustee with this power of appointment, he could have some of the trust assets be directed to help his siblings or his children or his parents. He just can't willy-nilly withdraw assets to help himself. That is called self-dealing, and the IRS would then say that he has crossed the line from being trustee to owning the assets. So there are certain rules to be careful about, but with these four levers of control, he really has a lot of leeway. With control like that, who needs ownership, right? That, my friends, is going to be the plan for my two kids. At what age will they receive their inheritance? Never. My two kids will never outright own the bulk of their inheritance. However, as trustee of their own trust, they will have substantial control. They can help siblings, children in trouble. They can appoint an independent trustee if they ever need financial aid outside the HEM standard. That's a lot of control. Another benefit of not having an inheritance just drop on your lap is that it's less likely for my kids to get hit by the lottery winner's curse, this sudden change in wealth that causes sudden change in behavior that's often not great. I want my kids to experience the same kind of excitement, satisfaction, and purpose that I felt building my own path. Knowing all the while that the trust is always there as a safety net, not as a crutch, and definitely not as a golden cage that could dull their God-given inner drives. Welcome to Estate Planning 102. A lot of people think that a revocable living trust is only about avoiding probate, but it is so much more powerful. Stick around because I'll be doing more videos about subtrusts. A descendant trust is not the only subtrust you can set up in a revocable living trust. There are holdback trusts, dynasty trusts, marital trusts, bypass trusts. And if the idea of a revocable living trust is totally brand new to you, I suggest watching this video where I do a deep dive at a much more introductory level.